Welcome back to Strange Mind 6. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be reading more of Spooky, Creepy Long Island. We're going to be reading Chapter 4, but before we begin, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and without further ado, my dear friends, grab a snack, grab a drink, or sit back and relax, and let's get to it. Chapter 4: The Haunted Lighthouses of Long Island. Long Island's coastline is 340 miles long. This coastline is dotted with lighthouses that have served their coastline faithfully since their construction. Long Island is perhaps unique in possessing not one, but two haunted lighthouses gracing its shore, and a third in a nearby body of water. Lighthouses solitarily guarding their weather-lashed shores bring to mind the loneliness of their keepers, and the legends often arise of the dedication of these keepers continuing after their death. Fire Island Lighthouse. Fire Island National Seashore is a popular tourist destination. A promotional site claims that Fire Island is unlike anywhere else on Earth, with beautiful beaches, unique communities, dynamic culture of pines and cherry grove, and miles of boardwalk and walkways to explore. Fire Island also offers camping, hiking, swimming, surfing, boating, fishing, and has hotels and restaurants for vacationing visitors. But those in search of unearthly adventures have a different reason for visiting this scenic island. The island history goes back to 1653, when Isaac Stratford of Babylon built a whaling station named Whalehouse Point. Stratford and his crew would haul boats across the narrow sand island to the ocean and build towers from which a man could watch for the spouting of whales. When a spout was seen, Stratford would yell, "Whale off!" and the boats would be launched into the rough surf in pursuit. In 1825, the federal government, funded the construction of a lighthouse at the western tip of the island. The first lighthouse built on Fire Island was completed in 1826. It was a 74-foot high, cream-colored octagon pyramid made of Connecticut River blue split stone, built at the end of a barrier island between the waters of the Great South Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. The first lighthouse was adjacent to the inlet. As late as 1856, a sailor passing through the inlet could yell to the lighthouse keeper as they passed within feet of the lighthouse, but due to westward migration of sand along the beach, known as littoral drift, less than 100 years later, the inlet is now approximately 6 miles west of the ruins, and 4 miles of sand have accumulated between the lighthouse and the western tip of the island. The Fire Island Light was an important landmark for transatlantic ships coming from New York Harbor at the turn of the last century. For many European immigrants, the Fire Island lighthouse was their first sight of land upon arrival in America. The Fire Island's first lighthouse was not effective due to its height. It was taken down and the stone was reused to build the terrace for the present lighthouse. Today, a circular ring of bricks and stone are all that remain of the original lighthouse. Legend tells us that the lighthouse keeper at the time of the deconstruction of the first Fire Island lighthouse was a Mr. Nathaniel Smith, who lived at the lighthouse station with his family. Lieutenant J.T. Morgan, the contractor building the new lighthouse, ran out of material and decided to take apart the old lighthouse and use those stones to save the cost and trouble of purchasing and transporting new materials. To avoid delays in the construction of the new lighthouse, the contractor convinced the Smiths to live in a wooden shack until construction of the new lighthouse was complete. Unfortunately, living on the coast of Long Island without modern amenities and exposure to the elements brought illness to the family, and one of their young daughters died. Supposedly, the Smiths had to wait 3 days before a doctor arrived, and there they were forced to watch their daughter slowly waste away. The doctor arrived too late, and some say you can hear a man moaning for the loss of his daughter. Others say you can hear footsteps on the lighthouse stairs. A conflicting report states that the stone from the old lighthouse was used to build the terrace that the new lighthouse sits upon. Another legend claims that one of the lighthouse keepers unalived himself in the tower of the lighthouse, suffering from the loneliness of his solitary duties. In an even grimmer turn, human skulls and other skeletal parts are reported to wash up on the beach in front of the lighthouse. Although these legendary tales were all supposed to have occurred in the first lighthouse, it is the second Fire Island lighthouse that seems to have inherited the hauntings from the first Fire Island lighthouse. In 1857, Congress appropriated $40,000 for the construction of the new tower, 168 feet tall. This tower was made of red brick and painted a yellow color, a very light yellow. It was lit for the first time on November 1st, 1858. The tower was changed to present-day mark of alternating black and white bands in August 1891. The United States Coast Guard has been present on Fire Island since its inception in 1915. A Coast Guard station was established on the lighthouse tract, and when the United States Lighthouse Service was dissolved in 1939, the administration of lighthouses was placed under the jurisdiction of the United States Coast Guard in the interest of economy and efficiency. Presidential Reorganization Act. In 1964, a bridge was built across the Fire Island Inlet, allowing easier access, which aided Fire Island's tourism industry. Despite this increase in tourism, the light of Fire Island died when the second Fire Island lighthouse was decommissioned as an aid to navigation on December 31st, 1973. The costs of maintaining a lighthouse were deemed prohibitive, and the Fire Island light was replaced by a small flash tube optic atop the Robert Moses State Park water tower. After the Fire Island Lighthouse was decommissioned, the Coast Guard gave the National Park Service a 5-year permit to use the entire lighthouse tract, approximately 82 acres. In 1979, the tract was declared by law to be within the boundaries of the Fire Island National Seashore. With limited funds, the major function of the Park Service during its early administration of the lighthouse tract was to prevent further deterioration of the buildings through neglect and vandalism. Now, between 1974 and 1980, private citizens grouped together in an effort to save the Fire Island Lighthouse. In 1982, the Fire Island Lighthouse Preservation Society was formed. They successfully raised over $1.3 million for the restoration and preservation of the Fire Island Lighthouse. In 1984, the Fire Island Lighthouse was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, and on Memorial Day, May 28, 1986, the Fire Island Lighthouse was relit and reinstated as an official aid to navigation. In December 1996, the Fire Island Lighthouse Preservation Society, through an agreement with the National Park Service, took over the maintenance and operation of the Fire Island Lighthouse and keepers' quarters. Today, the light is lit by two 1,000-watt bulbs, which rotate in a counterclockwise direction, giving the appearance of a flash every 7.5 seconds. The lighthouse is 7 stories high, 168 feet tall, and the light is visible from approximately 21 to 24 miles. Fully automated operation and maintenance of the light itself remains under the jurisdiction of the United States Coastal Guard. In January 2006, FILPS took over the ownership and maintenance of the beacon from the United States Coast Guard. The beacon will continue to remain on all charts as a private aid to navigation. The second Fire Island Lighthouse is still open to the public year-round as a museum and offers guided tours of the lighthouse tower. The gift shop maintained in the second lighthouse sells a book on haunted lighthouses. The book Ghostly Beacons by Teresa Schmid features the Fire Island lighthouses. Employees at the gift shop say the stories are just colorful legends created to complement the impression that the solitary seeming lighthouses impart to visitors when experiencing their quiet vigilance along the storm-beaten shoreline. Not all employees, though, are immune to the eerie effect of the legends, however. One woman remembers being scared to climb into the tower when the electricity was out and said that you could hear creepy noises. She admits it could have been the old building settling or the wind, but it was still uneasy. There is a ghost tour held in October, and even the ghost tour guides get nervous scaling the tower in the dark. It is definitely scary enough to climb the 182 steps of the long, winding spiral staircase where you can see through the stairs and contemplate how high you've ascended. Stories circulate about heavy doors opening and closing by themselves, and the topmost are windows rising by themselves when a long pole is required to open and close them. There are two reportedly strange or unusual laughter and banging sounds that seem to come from inside when no one is supposed to be present, an eerie feeling, inexplicable cold spots, and the appearance of a shadowy figure in the caretaker's house. The truth about Fire Island may never be known, but visiting the wind-whipped shore on a dark and stormy night is sure to be sufficient inspiration to fire one's imagination to dream about the life of Long Island's lonely lighthouse. Execution Rock's Lighthouse. Execution Rock's Lighthouse is located on an outcropping of rocks in Long Island Sound. Built in 1850, the lighthouse was constructed to warn mariners sailing around the rocky shore off Sands Point, located off the north shore of Long Island near Port Washington. The brown and white banded lighthouse stands 58 feet tall, casting a flashing white light which reflects in the waters approaching New York Harbor. The evocative name of this lighthouse station is inspired by any of the several legends that have evolved around the rocks it is founded upon. British nautical charts gave the dangerous outcropping the name Executioner's Rock. The name bestowed upon these rocks by the many ships that ended their nautical careers prematurely by sailing their last voyage into the rocks, their fate the fault of insufficient lighting and heavy ship traffic. A popular legend relates that during the Revolutionary War, British soldiers abducted American rebels from their early American settlements, taking them to the isolated reef to be tortured and then executed. The British chose this secluded spot to avoid inspiring further dissent among the colonists. The British chained condemned prisoners to metal spikes driven into the rocks and let the prisoners struggle for their life against the rising tide, either drowning when the tide overcame them or leaving them helpless to defend themselves against the devouring by sharks. In a contemporary twist, it is rumored that U.S. Lighthouse Service relieved any keeper from duty without question, not only because of the ghostly history of the rocky base the lighthouse is built upon, but also because serving as the keeper of the lighthouse was so lonely that it felt like a sentence of death. Local fishermen have continued to say that the disembodied spirits of those who died on the rocky reef, either by torture by the British or maritime misadventure, can still be seen on cloud-darkened nights from the surrounding storm-tossed seas, haunting the shores of this lonely lighthouse station. Race Rock Lighthouse. Race Rock Lighthouse is on Race Rock Reef, a dangerous set of rocks off the coast of Fisher's Island on Long Island Sound. At the mouth of the Race, where the waters of the Sound rush both ways, depending on the ebb and flow of the tidal waters. At this point, the water surges with great velocity and force, and in heavy weather, the waves run dangerously high and have been the cause of many disastrous shipwrecks. Race Rock Lighthouse was built under great difficulties. Francis Hopkinson Smith was the designer of the lighthouse and the engineer for the project. He later became famous as a writer of lighthouse stories. A Captain Scott was in charge of the construction of the lighthouse. By 1837, 8 vessels had been wrecked in 8 years on Race Point Reef. Finally, recognizing the danger of this killer of ships, in 1838, Congress appropriated $3,000 for erecting a lighthouse at Race Rock, but the money was never spent. In 1852, the Lighthouse Board reported that various efforts have been made and numerous appropriations expanded in endeavoring to place an efficient and permanent mark on this point. Buoys cannot be kept on it, and spindles have hitherto only remained until the breaking up of the ice in the spring. In 1853, $7,000 was appropriated for a beacon on Race Rock. The funds were spent on installing a day beacon, which was completed in 1856. In 1854, Congress appropriated $8,000 for the construction of the lighthouse station, but only $1,600 of this was spent, mostly on surveys. In 1869, $90,000 was appropriated for a lighthouse at or near Race Point, Fisher's Island, Long Island Sound. After additional preliminary surveys costing over $6,500, an additional appropriation of $10,000 was made toward preliminary research in 1870. Based on the findings of the preliminary research, the Lighthouse Board estimated that it would cost approximately $200,000 to build the lighthouse, and so on and so forth. The lighthouse included a keeper's quarter, and the towers were built in only 9 months. The lighthouse keeper's quarters are relatively small compared to the tower, a squat 1.5 stories high. But from the center of its front, the granite light tower ascends. The lighthouse tower stands 67 feet above sea level, and the total cost was $278,716.33, and it was first lit in 1879. Race Rock Light was automated by the United States Coast Guard in 1979, and it is still active to this day. Race Rock Light is believed to be haunted and was investigated by the Atlantic Paranormal Society, or TAPS. On an episode of their popular television show Ghost Hunters, featured on the Sci-Fi Channel, Ghost Hunters not only brought in excellent ratings, but also gave a high-profile and easily accessible showcase for contemporary paranormal investigations, inspiring the growth of many existing regional paranormal investigations groups, as well as the founding of many more. The show is a unique combination of chillingly unusual ghost stories and high-tech investigative methods. Many people watch the show not only for the paranormal investigations, but also for the drama which displays between the members of the investigative team, often having the same appeal as a soap opera for the show's many dedicated viewers. Fortunately, I've known Brian Harness from Ghost Hunters since high school. I called Brian to ask him about his experience when they visited the lighthouse to explore its paranormal activities. Brian reported that there were unusual EMF electromagnetic frequency spikes inside the lighthouse, and went on to say that he heard unexplained voices whispering and murmuring indiscernibly around the investigators, and shadowy forms that dissipated when a light source was shown towards them. Most notably, a remote camera picked up a chair moving suddenly across a room when there was no one in the room. Brian shared with me a conversation he had with the last lighthouse keeper before the lighthouse was automated in 1979. The lighthouse keeper related a story from his residence where he and his fellow lighthouse keeper were in the living room when the lighthouse's shower turned on without anyone present in the area. They didn't think anything of it at the time, but when they went to investigate the bathroom after the shower had stopped, there was a trail of wet footsteps leading upstairs. And that, my dear friends, is where we are going to leave it for today. Tune in next time for Chapter 5, The Mill Hill Windmill of Southampton College. This has been your host, Ruby, and I hope that you all have a very wonderful morning, noon, night, whenever this video reaches you. This has been Ruby, signing off.